Bună dimineața! O să începem. Good morning. Welcome. My name is Daniel Kozak. I'm the local media consultant for the EIB office. It's my pleasure to welcome you and thank you for your presence in such big number at this traditional event organized jointly by the National Bank of Romania and the European Bank for Investment. So welcome to Transforming for Competitiveness. And without further ado, I will introduce a person who doesn't need any introduction, Governor Mugur Isărescu, for the opening speeches, followed by my colleague Nicolae Dovghelevici, Deputy Secretary General. Governor, you have the floor.
Deputy Secretary General Dovghelevici, Chief Economist Revoltella, distinguished audience. I would like to welcome you all to the National Bank of Romania for the conference organized in partnership with the European Investment Bank, titled Transforming for Competitiveness. I'm glad that we are able to meet again, as we have done almost every year since 2017, for this joint National Bank of Romania European Investment Bank conferences that address a very important topic, investment developments in Romania. Allow me to extend a warm welcome to the European Investment Bank representatives that are joining us, Deputy Secretary General Dovghelevici, you are very welcome, sir. Chief Economist Revoltella, you are very welcome. And Mr. Duenas, and to all our guests and colleagues that are with us today. As in the past, this event is focused around the European Investment Bank Investment Survey, a very useful country analysis conducted by the European Investment Bank. The 2023 edition is concentrated on the most important issues the Romanian firms are facing today, such as energy costs, climate change, and the green transition. We are glad to see that, according to the European Investment Bank findings, the overall investment picture in Romania has improved compared to the previous edition. For example, expectations around economic climate have increased substantially in Romania. Also, according to the survey, Romanian firms exhibit higher levels of optimism than the EU average when asked about the availability of internal and external finance. The conclusion of this survey represents a welcome addition to those of our central bank own survey on the access to finance of non-financial corporations in Romania. Our survey captures the real sector opinion or opinions on, firstly, the most pressing problems that firms faced in their activity. Second, financing costs. Third, the implications of a possible appreciation or depreciation of the domestic currency. And fourth, the impact of climate change. Taking into consideration the growing concerns regarding climate change and the impact of the mitigation policies on the banking sector, the National Bank of Romania has also started in 2021 a survey that captures the main developments in terms of climate change and green financing through several indicators under 5 categories. 1, real economy. 2, physical risk. 3, transition risk. 4, green finance. And 5, government policies. Now, let me stop here and to tell you that we are all looking forward to the detailed presentation of the European Investment Bank survey. I'm sure it's interesting and challenging like usually, and the following debate. With this in mind, I now ask Deputy Secretary General Dovghelovic to take the floor at this European Investment Bank opening remarks. Let me wish to you a fruitful discussions.
Dear Governor Isarescu and ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here. For me, it's not the first time, it's probably 20th time or 25th time in Romania, but I always come here with pleasure because this place reminds me, it's like a microcosm of the successful transformation that has been happening because of the enlargement that took place, the enlargement of the EU that took place 20 years ago. We are celebrating the anniversary of the biggest enlargement, which actually included Romania 3 years later, but it was something which was a historical achievement of certainly of the European Union, and I think it had a truly transformative importance for countries in this region. I also want to say that we are very pleased to host this event for the seventh, to be part of this event for the 7th time, to have this joint event with the National Bank of Romania, and I sincerely would like to thank the Governor and his staff for this. I would like to start, ladies and gentlemen, by saying that, of course, the last few years have been very special, have been very transformative in itself and memorable. First, the pandemic that hit the global economy. Then we saw the military aggression on your neighbor, Ukraine. And we also saw a number of market shocks, including a shock in energy prices. We also saw a return of inflation to Europe and a sharp tightening of the monetary policy, the sharpest one since the existence of the European Central Bank. We can say that economically the response in the European Union was successful to avoid bankruptcies, liquidity crunch, but also to keep focus on the transformation of the economy, on net zero transition, digitalization, and resilience of global value chains. The recent shocks have emphasized such transformation is the right answer to remain resilient and competitive. And these two words, resilience and competitiveness, are still key when we look ahead at the challenges that are awaiting us in the next few years or even a few decades. We have the challenge to become more digital. We still have the challenge how to deal with the energy crisis, to address both the lack of energy efficiency in our economies and the over-resilience on fossil fuels. The good signal is, however, that companies are meeting these challenges helped by the strong policy support. However, of course, there are tensions, there is a backlash. Resources might be harder to find in time of fiscal consolidation and tighter financing conditions. We don't know, for example, also in terms of the European Union instruments, what will happen beyond the horizon of the current Recovery and Resilience Facility, beyond the horizon of the current multi-annual financial framework. This is why it is so important to combine various instruments to strive for this transformation of competitiveness with efforts for a fair and sustainable transition. After strengthening our resilience to a series of shocks, we need to build our strategy, our path for the future, and our capacity to innovate to find the best way forward. And of course, investment is the key to unlock the resilience to the different challenges that we are currently facing. Romania is one of those countries in Europe with the highest growth potential. Despite the recent economic deceleration in Romania and across the EU, investment data show a good resilience to recent shocks and are finally accelerating after a long period of low investment. To foster income convergence with the EU cohesion, there is a continued need to upgrade both private and public capital, including to help firms seize the opportunities of the digital and green transition. Addressing social needs, such as education and health, is urgently needed to tackle the lack of skilled labor force, one of the main barriers to investment cited by firms across the EU. Our latest investment survey shows that the Romanian firms have become more optimistic, which is reflected in a higher share of firms investing. The energy shock hit Romanian firms hard, and according to the survey, they have adapted very quick and are on the right track of digital and green transformation, also thanks to the support programs. Nevertheless, investment gaps remain and need to be urgently addressed. Romania still has the lowest share of firms investing, 70% versus the EU average of 85%. And the share of Romanian firms facing financial constraints is at the highest level ever recorded in the EIB's investment survey. Policy support played an important role in creating buffers and sustaining green transformation investment when high energy costs prompted them. However, as financial buffers shrink, tighter credit conditions could threaten future investments. Now, what the EIB can do? The EIB has been active in Romania for more than 30 years. And we are committed to continue its partnership. When I say EIB, of course, I mean EIB Group, including our colleagues in the European Investment Fund, which is also increasingly important. We are committed to partnership with you in the investments needed for the green and digital transformation of Romania, to improve the business environment by closing the infrastructure gap, to support the education and health systems, to better maintain and develop skilled workforce, to invest in innovation of both large and small companies. The EIB Group plays an important role in mobilizing public and private investment. For example, in 2023, we signed financing agreements supporting 400,000 SMEs with 20 billion, that is in Europe, out of which a record 2 billion went to facilitate access to finance for Romanian SMEs and mid-caps. Let me also mention that Romania was the second biggest beneficiary of EIB Group financing in 2023 compared to the size of its economy. So congratulations for that. New financing committed last year was 4.1 billion euro, which is nearly 1.3% of Romanian GDP. This only highlights EIB's commitment to focus its resources where it matters the most, such as cohesion regions. Our strong results in Romania affirm our commitment to equitable growth and the convergence of living standards across the Union. Fostering a fast transition to net zero is one of the main objectives, and the EIB Group can help Romania on this shared journey. The green transition and innovation must go hand in hand, as many technologies are yet to be discovered. Early investment in new technologies, research and innovation will help our firms to remain competitive in the long run and to thrive in the post-crisis world. Europe can only emerge stronger from this crisis by investing in the economy of the future, which is green and digital. Manuel, my colleague, will later summarize the EIB Group support, including the implementation of the Resilience and Recovery Facility for Romania and what the next priorities are. The EIB provides predictable financing which can alleviate some of the problems caused by uncertainty and cyclical financial constraints. Our financing comes at a very competitive cost, which is becoming increasingly important in the world of higher interest rates. I would like to emphasize that our support goes beyond financing, and it is especially important in Romania. Our advisory team brings outstanding value added in project preparation and management in a cost and time efficient way. As you probably know, Romania hosts one of the largest EIB group offices worldwide and is the largest recipient of EIB advisory services, supporting the Romanian authorities in preparing and implementing projects co-financed with EU funds, allowing project promoters and ultimately project beneficiaries to receive valuable EIB technical support for project preparation and project implementation by advising public and private decision makers, commercial banks, and the clients of various key actors in crucial sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm stretching slightly your patience, so I don't want to continue for too long. I just want to flag up to you that there was a very recent discussion among finance ministers of the European Union, to which the State Secretary participated, about the priorities for the new leadership of the EIB group. We have a new president, Nadia Calvino. And I think I would just would like to outline to you the fact that, of course, when we talk a bit about the investment gap in Europe, the European Commission recent estimates show that this type of annual investment gap is in the range between 600 billion to 800 billion euro per year. So this is a huge, it's a huge gap that needs to be filled. Of course, the EIB group will play its role, and from the recent discussion, as I said, among finance ministers in Ghent, we can also draw some new conclusions. The EIB group will continue to play a leading role in climate transition, will certainly focus even more efforts on innovation, will also look at how we can support investments in defense and security through the innovation angle. And of course will continue to play a major role in Europe in financing cohesion. We will also try to focus our efforts on support to agriculture and bioeconomy, promoting adaptation and circular bioeconomy. We will also continue our efforts to finance social infrastructure, and something which is very important, and I especially welcome here the presence of EIF colleagues. There is this idea of capital markets union that has been on European table for quite many years, but now we really have to make it reality. If we talk about financing innovation, if we want to maintain European leadership in innovation, we need also to foster private financing and complement public investment. And of course, a very top priority outside the European Union is support to Ukraine, as well as supporting enlargement process and the strategic initiative of the European Union called the Global Gateway to build partnerships across the world in financing green transition. Thank you so much, Governor, ladies and gentlemen, and I wish you a very successful conference, and I'm proud that we have such a strong team here in place to present you now the results of the investment survey.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary General. Thank you, Governor, for taking time. The conference is now officially open. It's time to have a closer look at the results, and to do so, I will kindly invite our chief economists to present and discuss these results. So, Deborah Revoltela, Chief Economist of the EIB, will present, and Mr. Valentin Lazea, Chief Economist of the National Bank of Romania, will be discussing with her. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure and honor to be again here with the opportunity to present our work on investment in Europe and investment in Romania. What I will present is actually the sum of two different publications that you will see out of the room. One is our investment report, is our annual assessment of the investment situation in Europe, and the other one is the specific result of our survey of European and Romanian firms, that as well you will find out of the door. The main message that we have this year is that somehow we are still in a challenging situation, but with some positive news. We all know the transitions that are happening in our world. We know the net zero transition, digitalization. I would add also aging population and the deglobalization factor or tension in the value chains. That is something very important also in Romania. And with all of this, our economies need to transform, and transformation requires investment. We come from something positive, surprisingly, if you want. Following the pandemic and the energy shock, we saw that this time around, investment remained resilient, very much related to the policy support. But we also know that going forward, all this policy support will be somehow, there is a ticking clock on how supportive it can be in the future. So finding way to continue this transformation of the economy with more financing challenge, both for the public sector and the private sector, is what we are discussing now. Saying that, I will show a few slides to bring you to these key messages. The first is showing, the first graph is showing investment, real investment in the EU, and comparing this period, if you want, the post-pandemic and post-energy shock, compared, which is the orange line, compared to what we saw at the time of the global financial crisis and sovereign debt crisis. What you see is a completely different dynamic of real investment. Investment remained solid, so was affected, but reacted very, very strongly. And that was determined by various factors. We think the policy response was extremely important. It avoided the scaring, and it brought particularly a focus on continuing to transform the economies. And on that point of view, the Recovery and Resilience Facility and national effort have played an important role. If we look at the Romanian case, actually, and you base it compared to the pre-pandemic moment, you see that actually investment has been quite strong, and actually is strong in all components. So somehow you see this effort in transformation, that investment dynamics that stays for all sectors of the economy. Here I go back speaking about European data. What I show is at the European side, you see that this time around, the policy response has been quite instrumental. We look at the dynamic of public investment at the European level, this time compared to average of past crises. And what you see is, in fact, that public investment stayed strong, and the staying strong is quite important, related to, as I was saying before, to the flexibility on the fiscal rules, so that the exemption on fiscal rules on the one side, recovery and resilience facility funds that were made available and kept this pressure on continuing investment. But what we also saw is a lot of transfer from the public sector to the private sector. And actually what we were looking at, and that's again European data, we look in our survey to firms that tell us that they received grants on subsidies. And then what did this firm do? What we see is that there is a slightly higher propensity to invest in good things, where good things are research and development, innovation, clean technology, energy efficiency, or green implementation, for firms that received these grants and subsidies compared to others. So in fact, there has been some kind of push also in the public transfer to firms to continue to transform. And that's a part of a positive story that we have seen in the last year. But, and here comes the but, we continue to see large investment needs. Actually, when we look at a measure that we call a productive investment. It's the sum of machinery and equipment, intangible and infrastructure investment compared to GDP. We see that since the time of the sovereign debt crisis, a gap which the US opened, and it's a gap of 2 percentage points of GDP that accumulates year after year. In Romania, it's a different story. You still have the catching up of the capital stock happening, so the data would be different. But for Europe overall, this is really a sign that we need more investment and we need a good investment to happen. And on top of this, there is the big issue in terms of skills, gap in terms of skills, inequality, the social dimension that as well may require a specific investment in social infrastructure or specific spending in terms of reskilling. Now, with all these investment needs, we also see two things. I don't have a graph, but I think it's on the public sector side, I think commonly we are, and actually I will show it later, we are putting the accent on execution of the big investment plan and execution of the recovery and resilience facility. On the private sector side, what we think is that the tightening of monetary policy this time around, up to a certain point, was actually moving slowly toward firms because it was still companies had buffers they could use. But now it's coming, so the tightening of financial condition is finally getting to firms. And that's clearly the case also in the Romanian situation, where actually the percentage of firms that tell us that they are final constraint, it's very high historically since we started the survey. So it's really showing that these finance constraints are starting to bite. On the public sector side, what we are putting the accent is really this need of focusing on a proper implementation of the recovery and resilience facility. It's something happening at the European level overall, and we really think that it's important to work in implementation and acceleration of using the resources. Is one analysis that we tried to do is also looking at the role of public goods, public infrastructure, general infrastructure on firm capacity to transform. We have a couple of studies looking at the effect of good internet on firm propensity to invest in digitalization. It comes out, it has a very strong effect on the probability of firm to become digital, but also on the return on investment to firm. And the same happens with climate investment at the regional level, in regions where firms are good, in regions where the region is good in attracting, in spending climate adaptation or mitigation resources, firms do much more. So there is this complementarity on what the public sector does and the capacity of firms to also move in the transition. And we think this is an important element to keep into consideration. And then I move talking about firms. And the main problem, the main issues are clearly the net zero transition, the decarbonization phase, but also the adoption of digital technologies and innovation and the global value chain readjustment. Starting with the net zero transition, we see that Romanian firms actually are slightly more likely to perceive the net zero transition as a risk rather than an opportunity. And that has some implications because at the European level, what we find is that firms that consider the net zero transition as an opportunity invest much more to address it. So that has somehow some implication. It also shows that on the negative side, on the perception of the risk, you have also, it's tougher to adjust. You have to change probably much more and it's tougher in terms of adjustment. Nevertheless, the Romanian firms seems to be moving in terms of mitigation investment, at least that's what we see, slightly more than European one, and trying to transform. At the European level, also, we were looking at something that I sense is also important in the Romanian case. In this case, we are looking at the decarbonization challenge for the firms that are the most endangered, so the ones that are operating in the most carbon-intensive industries and that are covered in the ETS. Here, our analysis shows three important concepts. The first one is that actually the ETS, the carbon pricing in the ETS market generally works. In fact, what we see is that rising carbon prices lead the firm to reduce emission intensity, so it leads them to decarbonize, but it also leads them to invest and to invest in research and development. So in fact, the carbon pricing mechanism in the ETS is forcing a firm to transform. We also look over time, and the progressive tightening and the reduction of the free allowance in the ETS is actually confirming this message. So the carbon price mechanism seems to be something that has the potential to really guide the decarbonization process also at the level of firms. We also do a second analysis. We have a specific survey of manufacturing firms operating in the ETS. So those are the manufacturing companies in the most energy-intensive industries, so the one most challenged from the transition. And we ask them to self-define among those that are leaders or laggards in the decarbonization. And we check whether it's true that they are actually leaders, decarbonizing faster, or laggards. The interesting part, and very much reconfirm what I said before, leaders innovate more, invest more. Laggards have the perception to have investment gaps and are more likely to reduce in average the production capacity. So what we are concerned is that there is a sort of a decarbonization divide opening, with some firms that bet on the transformation and advance and transform fast, and the second group that actually is not really transforming and waiting, but slowly reducing the production capacity. The interesting fact is that all these firms, all the leaders and the laggards, think that uncertainty or regulation and or carbon pricing is actually the best enemy to transformation and investment. So we think that at this point has to be clear in mind. The clear path that we kept over the crisis, the clear policy message on commitment to net zero and to commitment to decarbonization path is very important for all firms, for those betting on a new market and trying to invest to catch it, but also for those that have to transform, that if they are not forced to do it, may delay the transformation process. A few other messages on physical climate risk. We see that Romanian firms are, like Europeans, slightly more aware of physical risk than European firms, and they are also active, slightly more active than a European firm in terms of physical risk. Something interesting, because it's coming to the policy agenda, the fact that in Romania there seems to be more appetite of firms for insuring against climate risk. That is something quite strange compared to the rest of Europe, where the market of insurance of climate risk is not fully available for firms. We get to the digital side. On the digital side, what we see is a gap still for Romanian firm compared to the EU, and at the end compared to the US, with a big difference between large and SME firm. we ask firms which technology they adopt. In general, they lag behind, but there seems to be some more take-up on the Internet of Things. And I think we will have some discussion later. I think there is something to do in interpreting what the firms think with Internet of Things, but even a very simple technology may be Internet of Things. And I think we will see that even in terms of the globalization, just a mechanism for digitally tracking supplies can be Internet of Things. So part of this digital transformation may be associated to simple technologies that end into the hands of Romanian companies. The last point is on trade disruptions. Trade disruptions are very important in the context of the global value chain. What we see is that Romanian firms are facing a trade disruption like all European ones. They are actually a little bit more prone in reacting to that. And in terms of reaction, there is a lot of take-up of what I was telling before, this investing in digital inventory and input tracking. There is something more. Actually, we were asking firms at the European level and Romanian level if they are diversifying their sourcing strategies, and it seems Romanian firms as European are actually quite a lot diversifying their sourcing strategy. We always have in the report an analysis of barrier to investment, and here we end up with the usual path that the major barriers for Romanian firms are associated to energy costs on the one side, uncertainty, and availability of skills. We had a special analysis this year also looking at who is affected by availability of skills. And what we see is that actually all firms are affected, but particularly the ones that are moving faster in the net zero transition, in digitalization, in innovation. So it's actually the frontier firms that are more challenged by this availability of skills. We think that there is something, and this is a constant all over Europe. So really looking at the skills gap and also maybe labor force participation is something important in terms of policy action. And going to labor force participation, we just have two messages to mention the importance of policies in this direction. Maybe starting from the one on the left, we look at the PISA mathematics score for kids around 15 years old, depending on the socioeconomic background of the family. You see the huge difference in Europe and even stronger in Romania. That calls for policies really in the medium term to get these kids from less advantaged schools getting higher in terms of their own skilling. And that would have a strong implication not only in availability of skills, but also in labor force participation. On labor force participation, you see the difference on the share of women employed with and without kids. And again, this has a strong implication on labor force participation associated to potential investment in kids' care. So that's thinking that actually when we talk about productive investment may also have productivity, competitiveness, also relies on availability of skills, on labor force participation, and this kind of investment are also quite important. With that, I really conclude. I think in our message, we continue to think that Europe has to invest for its competitiveness. That means a lot of innovation technologies, scaling up of technologies, supporting the green transition, and in supporting the green transition, focus on keeping the policy alignment clear, the timing of the transition fixed is also an important pact. Then public sector commitment, improving delivery on the public goods and internalizing the effect of public goods. The removal of a barrier, the single market, capital market union, and also the fact that financial instruments may really play a role in transforming incentive for firms, but they really need to be well targeted. And I think that's something that will take a lot of discussion going forward, also on the policy point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah, for the excellent presentation, and I also want to thank the EIB for having me as a discussant. Concerning the EIB investment survey, I want to mention once again that it covers 7 areas: investment needs and priorities, energy market developments, international trade, climate change and energy efficiency, innovation activities, investment impediments, and access to finance. I will comment on 4 out of these 7 using data from the National Bank of Romania, because we also have our own surveys, which in most of the cases are confirming what you are saying. Namely, I will comment upon investment, energy market, climate change, and access to finance. Also, some few more words. It's worth mentioning that your survey is done on a representative sample, including small and medium enterprises. The survey was done in April, July of last year, when the new fiscal measures had not yet been announced, so maybe the firms responding were more optimistic than currently is the case, but so were our surveys, which pertain to the first semester of last year, so they are coinciding in time. And your survey reflects both realities and expectations of Romanian firms. Now, allow me to say that some of these expectations might seem over-optimistic and should be taken with a pinch of salt. For instance, Romanian firms intend to use the Internet of Things more than their EU peers. Allow me to doubt this intention. Or Romanian firms intend to invest in new, less polluting technologies more than their EU peers, and so on and so forth. Now, going to the presentation, I want to thank my colleagues from the Financial Stability Department for helping with bringing this data. And let's talk first about the investments. According to our surveys, non-financial companies' fixed assets, and we are talking about non-financial companies with a turnover of more than 1 million euros, witnessed a 12% growth in the reporting year July 22 to June 23. And this is an increase compared to the increase in fixed assets of 8% in the previous reporting year. These firms are 38,000 firms, representing 5% of the active firms, hiring 64% of employees and holding 76% of assets at end 2022. This trend aligns with the findings of EIB of your survey, indicating that non-financial companies are inclined to indeed increase their investments. Second, financing and access to finance. Data from our central credit register corroborate with the EIB's findings, showing that in 2023, the number of companies that held an investment credit at year-end rose by 14% compared to 2022, while the total exposure in this credit category surged by 16%, reaching 58 billion lei. Access to finance is not a major constraint to Romanian firms, because according to NBR survey on the access to finance of non-financial corporations published in December of last year, 19% of firms identified access to finance as a pressing problem. Now here is a point of contradiction, because I understand that you say that this level is a historical record, high record, and it's 3 times more than in other European countries. But one should take into account that around 40% of Romanian firms are not non-bankable to start with, because they don't fulfill even the minimum capital requirements. On the other hand, banks are more than eager to lend, because they sit on deposits which are larger than the credit. So the ratio between credit and deposit is 70% in Romania. So only those who cannot or do not know how to borrow are not borrowing. Maybe this is a topic for discussion. That's why I say that there is not really such a constraint. Only in the heads of those who cannot, it is a constraint. On the contrary, labor costs compounded by the recent increase in minimum wage and production costs were the largest problems perceived by the firms in January-June 2023. Concerning energy, here is the most puzzling thing of all, because your results show that the energy prices are still a major concern for 64% of non-financial companies, but the actual data are showing that in the first half of 2023, their utilities expenses remain broadly unchanged compared to the first semester of 2022, actually increasing by 1%, due to the government's decision to impose a cap system on gas and electricity, including for the non-financial companies. 93% of Romanian non-financial companies reported in your survey that they face increases in energy costs, while in the first semester financial statements show that actually only 45% of them really faced higher energy costs. Perhaps, maybe, just maybe, this disconnect between facts and fears reflects their long-term thinking when these caps will be lifted and they will be faced with real energy prices. Finally, about climate change, the NBR conducted in July 2023 a survey among credit institutions and non-bank financial institutions, so those who are under our supervision, to assess their readiness for green transition. And we found that more than half of credit institutions and on non-banking financial institutions have indeed integrated climate change in their strategic documents. On the other hand, our survey addressed to the non-financial sector indicates a low proportion of firms concerned about climate change, because more than 60% of them perceive no impact on their business, or see these expenditures as being too expensive for them to make in the first place. The most worried about climate change, as one would expect, are the companies in agriculture, and also large companies are more worried than small companies in terms of climate change. In terms of activities to address climate risk, the NBR's findings are in line with your results, with energy efficiency and waste reduction being the most popular choices made by Romanian companies. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you to our presenter and discusser, Chief Economist. I think we are very good for time, and we have time for just one quick question, if there is such thing at this moment.
I'd like to ask you, to what extent the perception in Romania, companies' perception that climate change is not a big issue, is the result of a very small or non-existence of a carbon tax. Because presuming if there is a significant carbon tax, then that's a big threat for companies, big or small. And then about the whole report, I mean, how can we believe that we can compete with Americans? I mean, in Europe, with such low overall investment. I mean, this is a big issue. I mean, it's so.
Okay, I take, so I answer to a bit of your comment and comments. On the access to finance, I think that you have a strong point that there may be a lot of non-bankable firms, and actually that's their perception of being a finance constraint, but I take your point. What we see is that in Romania, there are less firms than in the EU that are happy to rely on internal sources of finance, so that's one part. And the second part, more that are finance constrained. But it can be that they are non-bankable, they don't have internal resources, and they feel the pressure in terms of access to finance. And I think that's still their perception in terms of concern. On energy prices, I think there is a lot of perception as well. In fact, we have another data that shows what firms are concerned in terms of energy shock, and there is a lot of concern on uncertainty on energy prices. So the second part is quite important. And I think that's something that drives a lot of firms, even a reaction to the shock, how they would take long-term action as a reaction to the shock. It's really this uncertainty on the future. And the last, on climate perception of firms, I think the message that we have are to, in fact, Romanian firms tend to perceive physical risk. On physical risk, they actually are waking up on the fact that climate change has effect on the firms. There is a gap overall at the European level, and the Romanians are also, they show the gap, like half of those that perceive to be at risk because of climate change are doing something in terms of adaptation. So there is a gap, but it's the same kind of gap that we have in Europe. The message on decarbonization, I think the message that I was trying to pass is that firms react to incentives, and carbon pricing is one of these incentives. In the ETS, we see that the tightening of the condition, taking back the free allowance, so making a condition tougher through the carbon pricing, have a positive effect. We are kind of concerned of a lot of policies that somehow unveil the effect of this of the mechanism of the carbon pricing tightening that is actually leaving more of the free allowances, that is every subsidy that compensate on energy cost, etc., that is weakening the mechanism of the incentive in the market for decarbonization. And we are concerned on that. There are a lot of reasons in terms of for acting and compensating measure, but we think that the mechanisms should not interfere, the compensative measure should not interfere with the mechanism that is trying to push out to move the net zero transition in a certain direction. So the design of a mechanism is very important.
I am pretty sure that there are other questions, but we are pressed for time, so it's without taking a break and asking for your kind patience, we're going to change the setup of our panel, and I'm going to invite the discussants, and I will be helped by Corina Pisc from SmartLink Communication to moderate this discussion. So without a break, let's arrange and start to the next item on the agenda. inviting the panelists also to join us on the stage, and give the floor to Corina Pisc from SmartLink Communication to introduce this session and the participants.
Thank you, Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining our session. In the next hour or so, we will be bringing the focus on a phenomenon which definitely can change decisively the perspective of a country's overall well-being. The issue of innovation, tackling new technologies and green innovation, but also looking at the challenges that Romanian companies have to face in their investment activities, from the sources of finance they have to the role they play in the global value chain. We will try to seek to explore and better understand what more can be done to support these companies. So please join me in welcoming our guest speakers today. Starting to my left, Mr. Ionuț Dumitru, Chief Economist at Raiffeisen Bank and a renowned professor of finance. Ms. Mihaela Lupu, Chief Executive Officer, UniCredit Bank, and also the President of the Board of Directors of UniCredit Bank. Mr. Philippe Bruchet, welcome, the Head of Strategy of European Investment Fund, and Ms. Diana Tarfula, the Director of Engineering at Adobe Romania, welcome. Also representing today Women Tech Global Initiative, right? Mr. Dumitru, help us try to, from a macroeconomic view, help us try to see the general investment health of Romania. Is the current momentum still going strong in the tightening conditions that start to matter? I know you've prepared a presentation for us, tackling the challenges. Thank you.
So I prepared a couple of slides, not to bother you too much, with some numbers just to set the stage for discussion maybe. And I will focus my short intervention on a couple of points I wanted to emphasize on Romania's challenges to improve competitiveness through innovation. First of all, from the theoretical point of view, there are three stages of economic development. One is factor-driven economies, which are the least developed. They are based, in terms of competitiveness, on cheap labor force, natural resources, and consequently, wages are quite low. The second stage is efficiency, investment-driven economies, which are increasingly competitive, but at the same time, they are not yet innovative. They are investing heavily in order to become more efficient, and they can pay higher wages, but at the same time they are exposed to some financial crises and external sector-specific demand shocks. Most likely Romania is in this stage, maybe in a transition phase between this stage and the next one, which is innovation-driven economies. Hopefully we are not lost in transition, and we will go to the next stage, which is again innovation-driven economies, which are the most developed. They are knowledge intensive. The services sector is expanding very fast. They are very innovative, and they are competing at the global level quite easily. Looking at our performance, again, Romania most likely is in the second phase, maybe in the transition to the third phase, and we are still investing quite heavily in our economy. Looking at the graphs, the investment activity was quite strong in the previous years. In terms of machinery and equipment, basically the growth was quite significantly higher than in the other countries in the region. Construction sector is increasing quite fast, driven mainly by the infrastructure sector, which is a good thing, and by institutional sectors. And Deborah had a graph in her presentation. Basically, the public sector is growing quite fast in terms of investments, significantly faster than non-financial companies. Romania is still well positioned in terms of wage cost, but that competitiveness factor is diminishing, I would say, and the labor cost is increasing, as you can see in the slide. The personal cost per employee is going up in nominal terms. Probably in purchasing power standards is significantly higher if you adjust with purchasing power standards. And at the same time, the labor cost gap is still, versus developed countries, is still significant, but had narrowed significantly in the past decades. Romania is still competitive from this point of view, but again, that competitiveness argument is diminishing, and at the same time, the wages are set to continue to increase, but that should come hand in hand with an increase in productivity. And I think, having in mind the still labor cost in Romania at the European level, I would say the automatization and artificial intelligence is a key risk for our labor market still. Looking at digitalization, I put in the slides a couple of graphs. Romania records a very poor performance in terms of digitalization, ranking well below European averages, actually at the lowest level, both in public and private sector. Looking at the first graph on the slide, for instance, the digital economy index in Romania is the lowest in Europe, and by subcomponents, for instance, for integration of digital technology, we are on ranking the lowest in EU. The second component, human capital, again the lowest, but I think there is an annotation to make here. The human capital component is divided into subsegments. One is internet user skills, and Romania is ranking the lowest by far in Europe. The second component of the human capital is advanced skills and development, where we are close to the European averages. At the same time, this advanced skills and development component, which is again well positioned in Europe, close to the European average, is again divided in a couple of components. One is information, communication, and technology specialists, the lowest positioning in Europe, in the case of Romania. Female information and communication technology specialists, second lowest in Europe. Enterprises providing training in this field, the lowest positioning in Europe, and a component which is well positioned in Romania is in the case of information communication technology graduates. We are ranking very well in this respect, the fourth place in EU after Ireland, Estonia, and Finland. So although we are very bad positioned in terms of human capital, in terms of IT graduates, we are still in top at the European level. The next component, digital public services, we are the lowest in terms of comparison with the other countries in the region by far. Connectivity, which is interesting, in terms of connectivity, we are close to the European averages. We know that in terms of connectivity, we have a good positioning. Going to the split private versus public sector, again, the positioning of Romania is quite bad at the European level. I would just emphasize, in the case of businesses, for instance, we have a huge gap in terms of cloud, in terms of trainings, in terms of big data, artificial intelligence. There is a huge gap between Romania and European averages. Going to the public sector, the biggest gap we have in terms of pre-filled forms, transparency, or digital public services for businesses, digital public services for citizens. Going to the next slide, in terms of R&D, which is, I think, investment which is a prerequisite for innovation, I would say we have the lowest level in EU in terms of percent of GDP in the business sector, but also in the public sector. And consequently, in terms of innovation, we are ranked the last in Europe as well. Look at Poland and Hungary, for instance, they are better positioned, significantly better positioned than Romania. And the last slide I have, again, in terms of innovativeness, I think the lowest level of innovativeness in Romania, the EU level, I think is a big challenge for long-term economic growth of the country. Looking at the table from the right side, I will just point out 4 positive factors and 4 negatives. I will start with the negatives. Basically, Romania is badly positioned in terms of domestic credit to private sector as a component of financial ecosystem of innovativeness. I think we need to do something with financial intermediation in Romania. And the current level of financial intermediation is extremely low. Secondly, research and development expenditure, as already mentioned, is the lowest in Europe, and this is again a negative factor for innovativeness. Human capital in the public sector, looking at institutional ecosystem of innovativeness, is again quite bad positioned. Policy vision and stability is again a negative factor. Yeah, we are scoring significantly lower than the global levels. And going to the positive things, to end my intervention in a positive way, the positives for Romania in terms of innovativeness, first of all, from the talent ecosystem component, the education attainment in Romania is significantly better than the global levels still, although the education sector, the perception is that the education sector is deteriorating. Mobile network coverage, again, discussed already, I think is a positive factor. We have a strong coverage or better coverage versus the global levels. Another positive thing is the exports of advanced services and medium and high tech as percent in manufacturing, for which we have a good positioning. I will stop here, and yeah, later on we can discuss more. Thank you.
Thank you. Very insightful presentation. Thank you very much. Ms. Lupu, going from this detailed picture of how Romania presents itself, how do you see the banking system further contribute to support competitiveness for companies in Romania? We've got some really valuable data here presented by Mr. Dumitru we might make use of.
Good morning, everyone, first of all. I think that I would start from the point that was mentioned about the lowest rate of financial developments, one of the lowest rates of financial developments in the European Union. So there is plenty of space. There is plenty of space that the banking system supports the economy. And in fact, the banks are keen to facilitate the access to financing for companies. We are offering a broad range of competitive conditions, and we speak both about pricing and about collateral requirements. As well, the banking system is absolutely not alone, because we are cooperating largely with the authorities for financing the economy. All the state aid programs are in fact, and together with the financial instruments, are transmitted to the economy through the banking system. And on this stand, we are benefiting from 3 main sources of funding, and these are the national budget, and here we have the Ministry of Finance, we are having the Ministry of Agriculture, Economy, Entrepreneurship and Tourism, and just to name a few. The second pillar we have is the EU programs, and here we are having the Invest.EU and the Recovery and Resilience Facility that you also commented and Revoltella quite broadly. And last but not least, we have the EU funds multi-annual financial allocation, which is a cycle that started in 21 and is up to 27. So I would say that these are the main components of support for improving the competitiveness, both on the bank side and on the authorities.
Thank you. We've seen that Romania is doing quite well in certain key sectors, such as construction, which is driven by infrastructure, but also IT&C. And I would like to move to Ms. Tarfulea. And just to confirm that, yes, Romania is building upon the success of its IT sector, a booming area, and it can further boost its capabilities, its services sector, definitely by applying and implementing coherent measures such as increasing the digital skills through its management practices at the firm level, and of course through education, tertiary programs, educational programs. How does a company like yours, a multinational company that is at the forefront of technological advancement, how does it see the potential and the digital skills market in Romania? Does Romania have what it takes for a company such as yours?
Hello everyone. Hello everyone, and thank you for having me today. So definitely Romania has what companies need in terms of skills and talent. Is it enough talent? That's a different conversation, and I tend to say no. I would start answering your questions by taking a look on how the talent in Romania looks like when it comes to the IT market. Romania is well known for rich talent when it comes to STEM, technology being part of it. I was running a small research last year, preparing for a presentation I was delivering, and I tried to find out how many medals Romania won at the International Mathematics Olympiad. And I learned we are attending this, the highest world competition since 1959, and until now we won 332 medals, gold medals, silver and bronze. Well, I think that says something about the talent on the Romanian market. How are we known? And now I'm speaking from my perspective as Adobe employee and Adobe leader. Adobe Romania is well known for its strong engineering culture. Adobe Romania is the largest R&D center in Europe. We have more than 1,000 engineers. It's something that is less known on the market. How did we grow so fast and so much? We grew because we found talent on the market. So Romanians are great engineers, and our background and our appetite for STEM led us to this situation. We have great engineers, we have great attitude, hardworking people. We don't have the language barrier. English is our default language in tech, and that helped, I think, this tech bubble growing so fast in Romania. At the same time, there are some things that we do not find on the market. Being brilliant engineers somehow pushed us in the execution mode. When it comes to product design, when it comes to building products, when it comes to research and development, I think we can do better. Product companies on the Romanian market, tech product companies, probably share the same concern that I share. When it comes to finding product managers, people that can help, who can help building digital products, our talent is very scarce because we do not have proper education for that. We're learning by doing, and we're learning when there is a need, and the need is very small because we don't have talent. And the same goes for R&D talent, and by R&D I mean deep research. And I'm going to give you a concrete example. We all know what generative AI or how generative AI exploded basically last year. Adobe is leading the generative AI research for images. Probably some of you may have heard about Adobe Firefly, our generative models for generating images. Well, we have a huge opportunity to grow in Romania in this area. The challenge that we have is we do not find seasoned talent like data scientists or machine learning engineers with experience that can help us building products or features here. And that's something I think the private sector can do better. We can work better with universities. Government can also have their funding programs to educate people, because we do have good DNA, we have great skills, but we do not, I feel we do not have proper and adapted to the reality education opportunities for people to help us building products and growing the private sector in Romania.
Thank you. So there is great perspective and great opportunity for growth. We just need partnerships, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Philippe Bruchet, welcome. I would like to, well, we know the European Investment Fund started its journey in Romania over a decade ago. Am I right? I think I'm right. Would you please tell us more about its activity in Romania, and mainly the implementation process? What stage are you at the moment? Are there any exciting projects you're looking in the future? You're looking at in the future? Thank you.
No, thank you very much for having me. Indeed, I think the European Investment Fund comes with a particular angle to Romania and more generally to the market. And if I were to try to explain it from a macro perspective, what the idea basically is, I would describe it as following, like picking up also on the previous expectations. We have two sort of trends, if you like, in the EU more generally. On the one hand, you have this move towards a knowledge economy. We've just heard it. We need, more investment in human capital. We need more investment in what Deborah would call intangible assets, things that you can't touch, and the things that the banking sector doesn't necessarily like to lend against because there's not much collateral, right? Software, patents, all these kind of things. You can see it in the macro statistics how there's been this massive evolution of shifting towards the knowledge economy. And at the same time, we have a relatively static financial system, right, which is traditionally and historically very bank-based. And now, again, it's not a surprise if I'm going to tell you, if you go to your local bank and you say, like, I have a great idea, lend me some money, but there will be no collateral that I can pitch for it, the bank will have a hard time to support you. Now, the angle that the EIF is trying to help to overcome that, also in partnership with the banks, is twofold. One is basically the venture capital business, to say, like, the really, high growth, young, innovative companies that need a lot of cash upfront with high expectations. Equity is the way to go. Right? So we invest regularly, and thanks also to the support of the Romanian government, in the venture capital ecosystem. Not with a view just to fund individual companies, but really with a view also to build up an ecosystem. That's an important thing, because success feeds success in that space. And the other area is basically through guarantees. Here the idea is to say, okay, let's work together with the bank. Let's overcome the problem of the lack of collateral in very specific segments that are important for the economy. Right? Let's say, okay, we as the EIF, we take part of the risk of a loan. And as a consequence, make it more palatable also for banks to go into these particular sectors. I think the most illustrative way how that works was during the pandemic, where basically from one day to the other one, the economy shut down, and the financial sector was asking, well, am I going to continue to roll over these SMEs, or am I going to say, like, I'm cutting my losses now? And the big bet was at the time, okay, let's look for guarantees, let's look for partnerships in order to continue the flow of financing to overall very sound companies that just found themselves in the middle of a pandemic and hope that we're going to get out of it soon enough. And it worked fine, luckily also that we found a vaccine very, very quickly. And now the idea is basically to apply the same idea to very specific sectors where we see a move towards ever more investment into intangibles and an ever bigger struggle of the banking sectors to shoulder these investments themselves.
Ms. Lupu, coming back to you, you have a solid experience in the financial sector, and you have known a great, significant presence in Romania. How do you see leveraging the expertise and the resources in order to promote and sustain green innovation and sustainable development, basically, in our country?
Indeed, I think that there have been mentioned also all the programs we are part of and all the risk-sharing schemes that we have been doing together with the state authorities where banks are actively involved. I would take a few examples, but maybe not before mentioning that in general the banks or have signed or are about to sign really important partnerships with international financial institutions, and there are several projects that were also quoted before. We have the sustainability, climate-related, innovation, digitalization, green financing and energy efficiency, green transportation, so all these programs are actually available. So the value of such portfolio that we see in the next 2-3 years is massive, and will significantly boost all the transition towards this sustainable green circular or digital economy. So having said this, I think that there are real greening signs in the financial systems. We see this tendency as well here. And I can give examples from my bank. For instance, in Unicredit Romania, we were active the end of last year as a sole creditor for a project financing transaction which was close to 40 million euro that we were doing for development, construction and operation of a photovoltaic plant, which is the Salaj one. This project did benefit from the long-term power purchase agreement, so-called PPA, with a large company, one of the biggest breweries, and this is unique of its kind in Romania. I take the chance as well to comment a bit on the PPAs, because from 2012 to 2020, actually this long-term purchase agreement did not have green light in Romania, and the reason why they didn't were that there were concerns connected to the state-owned energy producers. Then at the time, indeed, it was an obstacle in moving faster and in investment towards renewable. But as we know, in 2021, this ban was lifted, and as we speak, we have 8 PPAs that have been already signed, so the landscape is changing, the landscape is becoming more favorable towards renewable energy. Again, to comment a bit on the bank I'm representing, Unicredit, out of these 8 PPAs, 2 were concluded in connection with financing where we were as well part of the creditors. And this is indeed an opportunity to move. And it's one step closer, I would say, to the transformation toward a different energy system in Romania. As well, all the banks in Romania, us included, we are really committing to increasing the share of green lending in total financing portfolio. We have strong pipelines, renewable solar, wind energy projects, also storage. For now, we have highly advanced 700 megawatts, for instance. And also, I close this answer by remembering that the European Commission on March 11th approved an amount of 3 billion euro that will be part of the modernization fund to finance the so-called contracts for difference scheme. So I think we are moving in the right direction, and also the banks supported by the authorities are doing steps.
For sure we are. Since we've seen that small and medium enterprises are a very important player in the logic of all things, I would like to know, Mr. Bruchet, how exactly does the European Investment Fund help the innovative firms, the small ones, startups or scale-ups, the ones that are on the way to scale up as well?
Well, it's primarily through our work that I mentioned earlier in the venture capital business. So when I came over, I actually looked at the statistics, and I saw that the EIF accounts for something like 15% of the European venture capital fund market. And then knowing that I was going to come into an audience of mostly economists, I was getting nervous. I was thinking, is this too much? Is that actually a good thing if a public institution like the EIF accounts for such a large share of a market that is intended to foster fast-growing companies in Europe? And the answer that I came to is yes. It is actually too much, but I don't think that the numerator, the activity of the EIF is the problem, but it's the denominator. It's that the venture capital market in Europe remains, and also in Romania remains, massively underdeveloped. I mean, the most natural way of looking at it is to compare it with the US, which is of course a steep task, but there's absolutely no reason why Europe with a similar market should have a fifth of the venture capital market of the US. You can say, okay, maybe part of the US activities is driven by overheating, but even if you discount for that, even 2 to 3 times is just a huge difference. And in particular, because we're not talking about an esoteric segment of the financial system, we are talking about the engine of the real drivers of growth and innovation in Europe. So indeed, it's a problem that the EIF is still accounting for such a big share in the market, but I think we are making progress. I think Romania is a particularly good example of where really years and years of providing a base load for the market to really develop also an ecosystem is showing its fruit, with the first Romanian unicorn also having been supported by the EIF. So I think we are nowhere close to where we want to get, but I do think that providing that support in cooperation with the national government is an important one. Also in the view, and that's just a small remark, because I hear people always talking about IPOs. In Europe, we don't have enough IPOs. That's true, yeah, we don't have enough IPOs, but even if you look to the US, IPOs, so initial public offerings at the stock markets, is not what's fueling the activities there. What's fueling the activities in the US is, well, first of all, the massive mobilization of the private sector, where we still have a long way to go. And this is where the Capital Markets Union and all of this discussion is coming in. But it's also really the understanding that you need to create an ecosystem that drives itself. I mean, most exits of venture capital funds in the US is trade sales. It's the big successful companies from yesterday that buy the new ones because they're interested in the ideas. They are interested in continuing to benefit from that system. And so it's really, to a certain extent, a long grinding way. I think we are still at an early stage, but having said that, I also think that big progress has been made.
Because you mentioned the United States and the global competition, I would like to ask you a question, and the other esteemed guest speakers. What do you think it's missing for Europe, and something that can be applied to a country like ours as well, Romania? What do you think it's missing to step up?
I think there are 2 things that come to my mind. The first one is maybe a little bit provocative, but if I'm listening to the discussion about climate in Europe more broadly, I sometimes have the impression that this is sort of a bureaucratic endeavor, right? So it's Brussels has decided climate is the topic, so now it trickles down into all kinds of spheres of the business world. But this is not how we should be looking at it. I think it's really We need to change the mindset. I mean, to give you two simple statistics, countries accounting for 50% of global CO2 emissions, that's all the big countries, more or less, have committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. If I ask the engineers and back at the EIB, they will tell me that for 50% of current CO2 emissions, we don't have the technology actually to get rid of it. We simply don't have it. Even if from today to tomorrow we say like, okay, let's scale all our solar, all our wind, everything we have, globally, 50% of the CO2 emissions will still stay. Now, we can have large philosophical discussions if green tech is going to be a driver of growth. I don't know that, right? But what I know is, if you add these two things together, it's definitely a massive market opportunity. And there is a real market economic reason for Europe to jump on the train and try to be a leader and not a laggard, continuing to invest in assets that we know in 10 to 15 years will be stranded assets, right? So there is a question of mindset, how we look at things like climate change, and you can expand that also to other areas. We should not look at it just as a bureaucratic central planning target. It's looking for the business opportunity. And the other thing I mentioned is we need to urgently make progress on the capital market union. Again, where is the money coming from for the innovative businesses in the US? It's not coming from the state agencies, it's coming from the big pension funds, it's coming from the big insurance companies. As long as we don't manage to get them on board, we'll always be trailing behind.
Mr. Dumitru, do you think Romania is capable of playing a key role in frontline for Europe, not just itself?
Okay, I will just refer to Romania. Basically, yeah, in order to progress more and become more innovative, I think we need to capitalize more our advantages, our pluses, and work harder on our minuses. And I will quote again the pluses we are having. The education sector is still a plus. The education attainment in Romania is still a plus in terms of innovativeness. But I think there is one thing to mention. First of all, in terms of basic skills we are producing in the education sector from the IT point of view, from let's say the information technology point of view, the averages are not so good. We are speaking about talents, and it was mentioned during the discussions in this panel. Romania has a very good positioning when it comes about the advanced skills and development for which we are close to the European averages. But when it comes about basic skills in IT, we are positioned very bad. Secondly, I think we need to capitalize more on our very good network coverage, which is one of the best probably in Europe. And at the same time, we need to work harder to improve the financial ecosystem. Again, financial intermediation should be, I think, an important topic. How we develop financial intermediation in general and how we can help the innovation sector to progress more. Secondly, we need to invest more heavily in research and development, and I think smarter, I would say. I'm thinking about the fiscal incentive we had for the IT sector for 2 decades already. I think we can make it smarter. Look at Poland, for instance. They have a fiscal incentive, but for the companies which are producing intellectual property, if they have patents, if they are producing innovative things, they are stimulated with fiscal incentives. We are not doing that. We gave an incentive for everybody in the IT sector, but we need to stimulate more innovation than just regular things, simple things, low value-added things. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Fula, you're also the director of Women Tech Romania chapter. Why do you think Romania would need such an initiative, and what exactly does it do for the business landscape here?
So So Romania, Women in Tech Romania chapter is a topic that I'm involved into as a volunteer, and it's very dear to my heart because it supports a cause that I truly believe in, which is the gender representation in tech. So my perspective comes from the, and it refers to the
And
tech.
here we touch gender equality.
Yeah, to the tech sector. And I was reflecting a bit on the chart that Mrs. Deborah was sharing with the percentage of women with children versus women who don't have children and their involvement in jobs and impact in jobs. We see that in the tech sector. And if we are referring to the segment, the demographics above 35, the percentage of women in tech who stayed there and continue to grow is very, very light. It's small. So maybe overall across tech, we have about 30%, I would say, women representation. But if we are looking at the deeply technical roles, women who are in engineering, in leadership positions in tech, given that the phase of life when seniority is there in terms of experience, it's also competing with important life milestones like having children and families, then the landscape is not very, I would say, friendly with women. So that is why Women in Tech Romania was funded. We kicked off the chapter last year, and our mission is to empower women and girls to pursue and to continue a career in tech. And our mission is to empower more than 5 million globally women in tech by 2030. Well, what does that mean concretely for the tech landscape and for companies? That means support for implementing mentorship programs, support and inspiration to promote some role models, to help companies developing programs, internal programs that are supporting women in technology and that are attracting more women in tech. There were some statistics shared earlier about the number of graduates in tech in Romania, and I think we were on the 3rd place or 4th place in Europe. That is true, and I'm so glad to see that more and more girls choose to study tech, like Polytechnica, University of Bucharest, cybernetics, and so on. So there are positive signs. More and more girls go into tech. And at Adobe, for example, we have 30% gender diversity, which is a lot higher than it was 7 years ago when I joined the company. But this is the entry segment, is the segment 20-25. The more we look at the higher segments, the gender diversity doesn't look good. And you may wonder, how does that translate in terms of business impact? Companies that create products that address needs of the customers all over the world, those products need diverse workforce. Diversity, it's a big topic for the outcome of the generative AI models. We need diversity. We need gender diversity. We need cultural diversity, all sorts of diversity, so that our products, that the digital products, better address the needs of the customer, hence increasing the revenue. There are studies that show that gender balanced workforce translates into higher revenue, in better employee morale, better engagement, and so on. So our mission is to create these opportunities, to create partnerships between companies and public sector, to offer more opportunities for women in tech. And maybe at some point we will have also statistics about how many women we have in tech, because there are, for now, it's still very complicated to find out how many Romanian women are working in tech. And if we go and try to find, to have a deeper dive, how many women are on engineering roles in the IT sector in Romania, it's a guesstimate right now. And yeah, it's something that I think it should be addressed with more intention, both by companies, but also the public sector.
So progress is being made, but slowly. Ms. Lupu, would you relate to the subject in the banking system?
Well, in fact, I'm also in my role in the group. I'm executive officer for Eastern Europe, Central Eastern Europe, for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I totally relate with the considerations on the tech world. In the banking system, yeah, depends where you look, but higher you go, it's a bit opposite than it's the diversity topic. But I think here on UniCredit we are an excellent example because we are perfectly balanced gender, but I think more than the gender balance, I relate very much with the other thing that was mentioned. I am very to my heart to discuss ideas diversity, because actually this is what I truly think that brings progress. So of course it's one aspect to start from gender, but then we always hope, and we are in the competitiveness world based on skills and capacities, but I think that more towards ideas diversity is where I think the world can be better.
Indeed, and fostering innovation. Because we are running out of time, there are still two questions I wish to ask. One for you, Ms. Lupu. We've seen a credit boom for the last few years, since 2021. This has slowed down, obviously, after the financial tightening. How does the industry see the perspectives? What does the industry expect in the future in terms of credit development, and how do you feel the ones that need their appetite for credit, the ones that need a credit? How do you think this will change in the future, considering the financial changes that have been implemented and are still to come?
So I think that starting 21, we know very well that we have been living really an absolute unprecedented and atypical behavior. So we were having the environment severely affected by the COVID, and at that time actually we were having moratoria characterizing and actually the survival mode and the capacity to really keep going the economy in the lockdowns context. And at that time, and actually always, I would say, the banking system was part of the solution. So I will start with saying that, and I can't say it more. Then we were having, because we contributed with financing, and we were actively supporting, especially SME sector, no? Because we are speaking a lot about this, and I think that the banking system did a very good job at that time. Then in Romania as well, we were having on this note the collaboration with FNGC always, so I think it was a point to remember. Then we had the energy crisis. In the energy crisis next year in 2022, again, the banking system was part of the solution as well. We were actively financing the energy sector. And then 2023, we have the inflationary environment, also Ionuț mentioned about it, and in this inflationary environment, the monetary tightening was taking a toll on the demand for loans. However, the corporate loans in euro were pretty high, so this was also because in the last 4 years, numerous state programs were supporting and were deployed, and again, especially for SME companies. And they were supporting liquidity, they were supporting investment needs of the companies. Of such help, I would say that in the short term we do expect that there will be continuing further support from such programs sustained by the Ministry of Finance, and actually all this supported, because without a doubt the entrepreneurial environment for the companies in Romania and not only was not really easy. Especially we were having here some parts which were mostly affected and most affected by the consequences of the recent crisis. However, on a positive note, I think we have quite an active entrepreneurial ecosystem in Romania. I think it's strong. Yes, a lot is still to be done, but I think more positive and important is that it's on the growth mood. You are asking also about what we do expect in the future. Yes.
Small and medium.
Yes, especially for SME and also in general. I think that with the pressure on the inflationary, then I think the rates will go down. I think we are in consensus that we may expect even starting with the second quarter this year. Then for 24, I think we expect 100 up to 100 pips lower than next year as well, and I think this will be supportive. What does it mean? It means that for companies especially, the effect will be immediate when the rates will drop, while for private individuals there is a lag because those contracts priced with IRCC will have a jet lag, but anyway, starting fourth quarter we expect to prove. But companies will benefit of this immediately as the rates will start dropping. I think we can expect for this year, but I think Ionuț is also more keen to confirm or not, growth rates in the demand for loans, both for RON, for both companies, for private individuals, going back to the levels which were the pre-inflation stepping up point. So in the area of 7-8%, and I think that will be valid for 24, but as well for a couple of years more at least.
Thank you. You were mentioning before the Ministry of Finance and the works you've had with the state institutions. I would like to ask Mr. Bruchet, could you please elaborate on the collaboration you've had with financial institutions and state agencies or governmental institutions here in Romania to promote competitiveness and to sustain what we are trying to support in the discussion?
Absolutely, and with great pleasure. I mean, I think Romania is exemplary in that respect, and in particular, one of the things that I find particularly noteworthy is that Romania took the view that it reserved a slice of its RRF resources to actually channel into the private sector, which I think, you know, if you take a longer-term view, is clearly something very interesting to be done. Also because, to take a step back, the point of financial instruments really is a realization that even if you have a big pot of money like the RRF, at the end of the day, the public money will never be enough to fill the investment gaps that we are seeing across all the different areas of the economy. So what you should be aiming for as much as possible, leaving of course aside necessary investment in public infrastructure, is to mobilize the private sector. And this is where, you know, this cooperation, public-private cooperation, can make a big difference, because in a way the philosophy is always to use a small layer of public money in order to take just as much risk to get the private sector to jump, right? And this is where sort of the cooperation between, on the one hand, the government of Romania and public authorities, European institutions like the EIB and the EIF, and then the private sector through intermediaries like the banking sector or the venture capital market, are trying to be effective. And I think the results overall speak for themselves. With a financing volume of the EIF alone last year in Romania of 2.7 billion euros, which is, I think, quite impressive.
I will wrap up our discussion on a positive note, Romania being a good example. Time is up, and I wish to thank you for your contribution and thank you for attending. We're not going to say goodbye before, if anyone in the audience wishes to ask a question, you're welcome to do so.
Hello, everyone. Raluca Negulescu-Balac from UiPath Foundation. Considering that last week the European Parliament voted the new Artificial Intelligence Act, I would like to hear your perspectives on how this regulation at European level will impact the innovation ecosystem in Romania in the following years. Thank you.
I can offer my perspective. I don't have an answer to your question, but I can give you my perspective. So I'm so looking forward to seeing what's happening now, because I was studying some numbers, and the investment of across Europe in generative AI represents 4% from what was invested globally. So there is this perception about Europe of being overly regulated. And maybe that is one of the factors that influences the number of, or lower number of startups compared to the US, or even compared to India, China, to Asia. So I do believe the AI Act is a good thing. But I also believe it has to be aligned with what's implemented in other geographies, like, for example, the US. I know there are ongoing initiatives, and the government is very preoccupied about regulating some aspects of the AI. At the same time, if Europe becomes overly regulated and other players are not, then that creates, I would say, a lack of balance, and Europe is not in a favorable position in this case. So from my point of view, I think the requirements that companies have to comply with in order to respect the regulation are yet to be clarified. I just hope they will come in due time, and I just hope they will not be determining the few AI startups in Europe to relocate to other geographies. So again, I'm not answering your question, just offering a perspective. Being on the side of the company, working in a company that will have to comply with these regulations.
If there are no further questions, thank you once again for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanking our panelists and moderator for this interesting presentations and discussion about innovation in Romania. There are two more formal items on our agenda before we move to the networking lunch. So I will kindly invite my colleague Manuel Dueñas, head of operations, to give us a perspective on head of public sector division, give a perspective on the operations and how EIB is supporting Romania.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, coming after this interesting panel and the previous presentation, I think that what I'm going to present to you is going to be very boring, but the good thing about it is that it's going to be very brief, okay? So bear with me for 5 minutes and I will give you a view. Okay, you have heard our Chief Economist, Deborah Revoltella, presenting the results of the EIB survey. I think you can show that investment in Romania, but also across Europe, has held surprisingly well despite the shocks that have hit the economy in recent years. We have also learned that firms in Romania and across Europe are much more likely to report a high increase in energy spending compared to firms in other parts of the world. Although the chief economist of the bank, central bank, tends to disagree on that because the figures doesn't sum up in the end. But okay, I think we will take note of it to improve our survey. Okay, while most Romanian firms have responded to the energy crisis by investing in energy efficiency measures, much more needs to be done to achieve energy resilience. The European Union and the Romanian government, through the Romanian Recovery and Resilience Plan, are providing a strong response to these challenges. Of the 28 billion euros, which is a huge amount, available to Romania under this fund, 44% aims at the reduction of carbon intensity of the Romanian economy. Decarbonization is not only important or essential to address the climate crisis, but also, and has been mentioned, is also a key factor to ensure competitiveness and energy security going forward. Speaking about competitiveness, I'm very happy to see so many promising innovation projects being implemented in Romania. And it's also very good to see that the financial system in Romania is taking clear steps toward greening its portfolio and providing further support to SMEs, mid-caps, and companies in this area. Here I would like to highlight the important role of EIB and the European Investment Fund in providing support to financial intermediaries to ensure that mid-caps, SMEs, and startups in Romania have adequate access to finance. In 2023, the EIB has provided loans to 6 financial intermediaries for a total of 280 million euro. And together with the European Investment Fund, they had provided guarantees for a total value of 2.6 billion. These financial institutions to allow them to do 2 things. One, to increase their lending, and even more importantly, to increase the credit risk exposure to these companies. It is important also to note that in 2023, the European Investment Fund has not only provided guarantees for SMEs, but as well invested in 60 million euros in 2 funds, which will provide equity to innovative startups in Romania, and particularly to those developing new solutions to foster the green economy. In addition to helping small and early stage companies to grow, the EIB is also playing a significant role to boost public and private investment. In 2023, the EIB started implementation of its agreement with the Romanian Ministry of Finance to provide up to 4 billion euros co-financing for investment receiving grants from the Resilience and Recovery Fund. It's been mentioned that the investment need is much more than the financing available through grants. So therefore, this co-financing provided by EIB is extremely important. And more concretely, EIB has approved loans for the co-financing of the A7 motorway and the A3 motorway for a total of 1.4 billion euros. These loan agreements can already be signed with the Ministry of Finance. We have approved 2 additional financing for a total of 600 million euros for railway projects, Caransebeș-Arad and Cluj-Episcopia railway lines. Concerning EIB support to private corporate sector in 2023, we are supporting the promising healthcare sector in Romania, where we are helping local innovators and companies that drive to compete globally. A good example of this is the loan that the EIB granted to Antibiotice of 25 million euros, that the Romanian and Antibiotice, if you know the company probably from here, I mean, it's clearly an international market player, and they intend to increase production. In the energy sector, it's important to mention that last year we kept supporting Romania in its energy transition by providing financing to develop photovoltaic panels for industrial business, the rollout of electric vehicle charging stations, energy efficiency in residential buildings, particularly in Bucharest, and new wind energy generation capacity. And as you know, ensuring that existing nuclear power generation is safe and clean is a key component on Europe's strategy to achieve its climate goals. In line with this strategy, the EIB has provided a loan of 145 million euros to finance the construction of Europe's first tritium removal facility in Romania. The project will contribute to the protection of the environment first, and as well the health and safety of staff working in nuclear facilities. And now I'm concluding. I have mentioned some examples of EIB groups financing activity in Romania in 2023, and it has been a record year for us, with more than 4 billion committed financings to foster investment and competitiveness in Romania. But let me say one thing. This has only been possible thanks to the excellent cooperation and competence of our Romanian partners, both at the financial and institutional level. Among these partners, clearly stays the Ministry of Finance, for which we have been honored to have the Secretary of State, Mr. Andries, to give us the concluding remarks of this conference. So thank you very much, and I give you the floor. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for the nice introduction, and I would like to state two things regarding the relationship of Romania with international financial institutions. Probably is one of the most important relationship for Minister of Finance, because we achieved two very important goals. One is increasing the institutional capacity, and this is a very important objective for us in order to smooth the process and to be more efficient in our activities. Secondly, as you know, the Minister of Finance is the middleman in relation with international financial institutions, between international financial institutions and our colleagues from other ministers. So these projects help us to help our colleagues in order to achieve their objective and to implement very successful projects. Coming back a little bit, first of all, I would like to thank you for joining us, the conference, and for remaining till the end. It is a great pleasure for me to be part of this event hosted by National Bank of Romania and European Investment Bank, and I'm looking forward for the 8th edition next year. We gather today amidst a period marked by repeated shocks and financial tightening, aiming to spotlight Romania's investment needs and priorities to boost our competitiveness. This conference highlights the key points of the AIB findings of the AIB Investment Report 2023-2024, transforming for competitiveness, and facilitate a high-level panel discussion focused on propelling Romania's competitiveness through innovation. I found it particularly interesting how the report underscored the resilience of European investments in the face of adversity. It's enlightening to see that despite the global shocks and financial tightening, Europe has managed to maintain and in some areas even enhance its investments level. This resilience rooted in strategic public intervention and corporate adaptability speaks volumes about our collective strength and foresight. The report analyzes on the weakening factors supporting public and private investment, particularly in the context of forthcoming fiscal consolidation, present a crucial challenge for us. It's a compelling call to action, highlighting the need for targeted and strategic intervention to sustain and stimulate investments in innovation, digitalization, and decarbonization. The emphasis on structural transformation as a means to enhance Europe's prosperity and competitiveness caught my attention. The key policy priorities identified, including innovation, resilient supply chain, and scaling up new technology, are not just pathways to competitiveness, they are essential for our survival and prosperity in the rapidly evolving global landscape. Finally, the report's call to reduce uncertainty and other investment barriers resonates deeply with our strategy, addressing these barriers, enhancing the availability of skills, and fully exploiting the potential of the single market, a foundation step toward realizing Europe's competitiveness and innovation potential. At the end, I would like to touch a few elements that have been emphasized during the panel, because I'm very, very glad that few ideas which are in line with our strategy have been raised by the member of the panel. First of all, investments. We fully agree that the investment is probably the most important ingredient of a sustainable economic growth. This is the reason why also this year in 2024 the government will allocate around 7% of the GDP for the investment using national funds, public funds, international, European funds, and of course, one very important role of the government is to create the framework for absorption of European funds, and co-financing this is a very, very important element. The second topic is about education. Of course, education will continue to be a very important source of economic growth and improving the life of citizens. As a professor, I know very well the strong points and the weak points of the system, but what is very, very important to emphasize is that education is about cooperation between different stakeholders. And in case of education in general and financial education in special, I would like to thanks to our partners in this process, because we are cooperating very well with the commercial banks and other authorities like Financial Supervisory Authority, Bucharest Stock Exchange, and other entities in order to provide different programs for young people and not so young, for adults, in order to increase the financial education at the level of individuals, but also at the level of entrepreneurs. The third element is about financial intermediation and access to finance. As some member of the panel stated, the Romanian government, through Minister of Finance, support and create different instruments like grants or guarantees in order to improve access to finance, especially for companies, small and medium companies, which are not able to access or need a boost in order to access. And of course, the fourth topic is about decarbonization and green and climate change. As you know, Minister of Finance launched this year the first green sovereign bonds, and we'll use money collected through this instrument in order to support projects which will have a positive impact in terms of decarbonization, and we'll use this instrument in the future in order to incentivize our colleagues from different ministries in order to, first of all, to think and to implement different projects which are in line with our objectives. Thanks again for coming, and thanks again for great ideas that have been raised during the discussion. Thanks AIB for this very, very useful instrument about the perception, because sometimes perceptions are very, very important because will affect the behavior. And I really like a quote I read a few years ago, where the mind, or where you cannot go with your mind, you are not able to go with your body. So probably the perception reflects our intention, and is very, very useful to have this instrument. And also thank you, National Bank of Romania, for their surveys and all data they are providing to the government in order to improve our strategy. Thank you again.
Thank you, State Secretary, for the closing remarks. Thank you, everybody, for your presence today. Thank you to our speakers, moderator, all the colleagues from EIB and the National Bank of Romania, and of course, thank you and the National Bank of Romania for hosting us today. Thank you for your patience. And now it's time, if I may joke, we are well ahead of our time. We're actually 10 minutes ahead of the scheduled agenda. So I will kindly invite you across the hallway to the networking lunch. You all very much deserve it. Thank you.